Okay, so in the previous video we talked about solving equations. I gave you a simple recipe for solving all types of equations that you'll find in algebra. But remember, we only did two-step equations, which most of these, they start down here at step 4 and 5, and that's all you really have to work with. Now I want to deal with some more multi-step equations, things where we'll have to deal with some of these top 3 steps. So let's look at a couple of examples. In our first example here, I've got 5 minus x is equal to -1. Okay, so if I'm looking at my little list, and I'll bring it back one more time, the first step here would be to simplify any exponents or fractions that are hanging out in that equation. Notice we don't have any exponents, nothing to the second or third power. There are no fractions there, so we're good with that. We can still skip that step. And just to give you a heads up, for most equations in Algebra 1, exponents or fractions aren't going to be a major problem for you to get rid of. So you're going to be able to skip step 1 most of the time. Step 2 is to distribute. Get rid of any parentheses. I look up here, I don't see any parentheses, so I can again skip that step. But step 3 says to combine like terms. So in this case, what we want to do is on either side of the equal sign, we want to look and see if we can combine any like terms. If you look up here, we've got 5 minus x minus x. Notice x and x is a like term. And just as a review for what like terms are, and I'll show you right down here at the bottom, example of like terms. That would be things like any numbers, 2, 3, 10, -5. Any kind of number that you would have here would be considered a like term. Now when it comes to letters, anything with the same letter and the same power on the letter is a like term. So x, 2x, 12x, -5x, those are all considered like terms because they all have x in them and all of them have x to the first power. Now, when you start getting a little more trickier with like terms, if you look at, say, x squared or y to the third, notice they have to be the same letter, so these are not like terms. X and y are not the same letter, so they're automatically not the like terms. But even if they were, even if this was x squared and this was x to the third, it's still not a like term because the powers have to be the same as well. So if you want to look at, say, x to the third plus 2x to the third minus 9x squared, the like terms in that little expression are the x to the 3 and the x to the 3. You can combine these by doing whatever operations are on them. This is 1x to the third plus 2x to the third. That would be 3x to the third. That's what I mean by combining like terms. So that's just a little review for combining like terms. Up here, notice these are the same letter. They have the same power. They are like terms. So this is what I want to do first. All right, I want to take care of the minus x. Remember in the last video, I also said that if there is no number in front of the x, that is considered to be a 1. So this is -1x minus 1x. All right, so everything else about the equation is going to stay the same. So this 5 is automatically going to be able to come down to our new equation. And then this is what's going to combine. -1 minus 1. So if I'm at -1 and I go back -1 more, that's going to be -2. Signs are the same. You add, keep the sign of the bigger number. So in this case, this is going to be minus 2x. And then it's going to be equal to -1. That all comes down and stays the same. So there's our first step where we actually had to do something other than just add or subtract things across the equal sign. Okay, now we jump down to our third step here, which is combine, or fourth step, I'm sorry, add or subtract to get the variable alone. So in this case, what we want to do is this is the variable that we're trying to get by itself, -2 times x. This is times, so I can't do nothing with this until I get rid of this 5. Also, another rule for solving equations is a big one. Just because there's a minus here does not mean you're going to add 5 there. We always look to the left side of our number for the sign. Okay, what's to the left of the number? There is no sign. So if there is no sign, the rule is you assume that that's a plus. That's a positive 5. So what we're going to do now, to get rid of a plus 5 here, I have to subtract 5. So that's a minus 5 there. And again, what I do on one side of the equation, I have to do on the other all the time. So I have to subtract 5 over here from its like term on that side. Alright, so I've got a plus 5 minus 5. This cancels. And now this whole thing is left over. Let's not forget we had a little minus sign there. That's hooked in with this 2 here. So it's all got to jump down with it. So negative 2x all comes down as one big thing. And that's equal to negative 1 minus 5. Signs are the same. We add the numbers. 1 plus 5 is 6. And we keep the sign of the bigger number. So that's negative 6. Alright. So now I'm left with negative 2x is equal to negative 6. I'm down to my last step. Multiply or divide to solve. This is a negative 2. That's all one little thing. Alright. This term. Don't think of this as you're subtracting 2x. It's not what's happening here because there's nothing over here to subtract from. This negative 2 with this negative sign with this 2 means it's one number. It's a negative number. So this is negative 2 times x. So to undo the times, and I'll do it in a different color, what we're going to do is divide by negative 2. Okay? So what I do to one side, I do on the other. So that's dividing by negative 2. And then I'm left with, over on the left, I've got x is equal to negative 6 divided by negative 2. That's going to be a positive 3. Alright? So that's how you handle a multi-step equation. Again, these same 5 steps will show up every single time. You just ask yourself these questions. You go right down that list and you'll solve it most every time that you have an equation. So if we look over here at this next example, I've got 72 plus 4 minus 14c is equal to 36. So if I'm running through my examples here, or running through my little recipe, the first step is to simplify. Get rid of exponents or fractions. There are none. I can skip it. The second step is to distribute, which means to get rid of the parentheses. There are no parentheses here, so I can skip that. Third step, combine like terms on either side of the equal sign. So notice here's where my equal sign is. On this sign, I've got this expression, 72 plus 4 minus 14c. So the two like terms here are these numbers. So what I've got to do is combine them first. 72 plus 4 is 76. And then everything else comes down with it. That's minus 14c is equal to 36. And again, just like over in this problem, we have to look to the left of the number for our sign. There is no sign, so that means that's a plus 76. So to undo a plus 76, we want to subtract 76. And again, what I do on one side of that equal sign, I've got to do on the other. So there's my expression. So 76 minus 76, that goes away. Again, this whole thing comes down as one big unit, negative 14c. And now we have the signs are different, so what we can do is subtract these. So 76 minus 36 is going to be 40. And in this case, again, you keep the sign of the bigger number. In this case, it's 76, so that's going to be negative 40. You can also think of it as being on a number line. 36 is over here in the positive. And then to go backwards 76, where are you going to land on the number line? And that's going to be at negative 40. So finally, our last step again is to multiply or divide to solve. So in this case, we've got negative 14 times c. So to undo that, we're going to divide by negative 14. Then what we do to one side, we do to the other. So what we're left with here, and here's a case again with equations. They're not always going to work out to nice, neat whole numbers like you see over here. Sometimes you're going to wind up with a fraction or a decimal, or however you want to look at it. So notice, first of all, the negative divided by the negative, that means it's going to be a positive number. So we can get rid of the minus signs and we can say that C is equal to 40 over 14. Now there's about 3 or 4 different ways you can write this depending on what they ask you. If they ask you to leave it as a fraction, you can leave it as 40 over 14. If they want you to simplify the fraction, then you have to decide what will divide into the top and bottom, what number would divide into both of those numbers. And the biggest number that will go into both of those looks like 2. So if you wanted to simplify that in its simplest form, we could also write this as 20 over 7. Alright? Now if they ask you to leave it as a decimal, then you'd have to break out your handy dandy graphing calculator, or if you're really good at doing the long division, you can do it right on the paper. But if you work that out and throw it into your calculator, 20 divided by 7 or 40 divided by 14, what that's going to equal to is like 2.9, or it's probably some bigger decimal, and I just rounded it to that. So there's 3 different ways you can write this answer when you don't have a nice whole number. It all depends on what they tell you, how they tell you to write it. So there's how to handle your first set of multi-step equations. I hope it helps. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Thank you.